Hey, all right, awesome. Arip, if you're still here, you thought you drew the short straw. No, definitely the graveyard shift. Last day and last session, so thank you all for sticking around. Going to share a few things with you around onboarding. Before I do that, and because it is the last session, I would like to do some arm exercises. So I'm going to ask you a few questions. First, I want to know who's in the room because I saw a few people come in. So anybody here from marketing or product marketing? All right. Okay. Sales management. All right. Sales enablement. And anyone here from L&D? Oh, woo! Go L&D. All right. Okay, so I'm going to share a few things with you, some insight into how I see onboarding. Does everybody here have some level of responsibility or input around sales onboarding in their organization? Yeah. Who thinks it's really difficult? Keep your hands up. It's super difficult. And it's amazing when I talk to sales VPs, how lightheartedly they talk about the whole onboarding process. Oh, Yaron, we need an onboarding program. Okay, no, what you're asking me to do is create a predictable process that's going to create successful new hires and help them to perform. That is not easy. And over the past sort of 6 to 8 months in Rackspace, that has been my focus, my sole focus in terms of creating an onboarding program that creates effective, high-performing sellers. Before I get into that, Arip and Axel, I'm joining the Vanity Slide crew. Bang. All right, bit about me. So I have a bit of a mixed background. Started off in sales, quota carrying rep. Did that for a few years, moved into more demand generation and business development and managing BD teams, generating pipeline. Swiftly moved on from there into product marketing. I found the whole idea of actually building the value proposition around what we do so significant in the value stages and the sales process that I wanted to be part of it. So I moved into product marketing. And then finally, that led me into sales enablement when our CEO back then said, we're generating the right leads. We have a compelling proposition, but we're not selling. There's a gap. We need to fill that gap. Q sales enablement. So that's a little bit about my background and where I come from. Onboarding, close to my heart. We've heard a lot of stuff about onboarding already. So you may see some things that you've seen already. Hopefully you'll see a lot of new things and my take on how I see onboarding and get some value from this. But I've been thinking about this a lot and thinking about what does it mean or what do we need to do to turbocharge new hire productivity? And I believe it goes way beyond a training program, which is typically front of mind when a vice president of sales or anybody in sales is asking you for a sales onboarding program. So I'm going to share some of this with you, but I'm also going to ask for your help. So you're going to see some pictures come up, and I want you to help me identify what those stages might be. And be aware, these images and pictures do get more cryptic as we go on. So the first step that I see is this. Can anyone guess what this is? Sorry, what was that? No. Before that. Anyone else? No. Closer? Interview. Excellent. Hiring. Yes, they do. It gets harder. Oh, we switched on. All right. This is so important. How many of us in this room are actively involved in the hiring process of salespeople? I didn't expect to see many hands go up. I think we absolutely should be, because when we're asked to make new sales hires productive, we should have a say in who comes through the door, because I've found over the past 6 to 8 months that significantly impacts the success of my program, depending on what type of people actually bringing into the company, and specifically looking at these 3 areas. So I think the number one thing that we all need to think about is hiring the right talent by partnering with HR. So I don't expect us all to just become talent acquisition people now, but definitely influence that process, because you're going to be responsible for making these guys productive and successful. So these are the 3 areas I look at. Attitude and mindset, spoken about this a lot. I'm going to say from experience that it's really tough to change mindset. So what I'm doing now with our HR team is supporting them to build a profile of the type of growth mindset, the type of personality profile we're looking for. So for example, having the right level of inquisitiveness, curiosity, wanting to continually learn, those are the types of profiles we need to bring into our business because we evolve so quickly. Looking at things like sales competencies, as sales enablement and L&D, we can massively influence this. So we did some analysis with our ops team around what competencies our top sellers have and how we need to build that into our recruitment plan and our hiring plan. And the final piece is market knowledge. Some companies don't mind hiring from different industry backgrounds, different areas. So I work in a company called Rackspace. I should have mentioned that at the beginning. For those of you that don't know Rackspace, we work in the IT and cloud services space, helping very large clients with cloud transformations. And if you don't know the market and industry, it's a steep learning curve to understand things like infrastructure and the cloud world and how you actually get value from it is really difficult. And if you're bringing in salespeople from outside of the industry, just that learning curve is so long, it's going to extend the time to productivity. So for us, market knowledge is really important. So you might have some more things, but I think definitely we have an opportunity to influence who actually comes through the door. Second image. Does anyone even know what this is? A what? Oh! Did I just give you a clue? No. Okay. Anyone drive really fast cars? Yeah, it's a dynamometer. And you know what it is? And it measures the performance of cars. So what do you think the next one is? Measurement. So I often find when we look at sales onboarding and any sort of sales enablement, we typically think about how we're going to measure this at the end because it's just tough. It's just really, really tough to measure. It's like how marketing was about 7-10 years ago, where marketing were trying to prove their worth through pipeline generation and having 40% of pipe. We're trying to do that in sales enablement. What often happens is measurement comes right at the end. I think it should come right at the beginning because it's so critical important. There are so many different ways that I think, based on my conversations with sales enablers, we're measuring the effectiveness of onboarding. I just want to hear from the floor and see how some of you guys are thinking about it or doing it. Any thoughts? Any ideas on how you do it? Go for it. Okay, what does that? All right.
Rate onboarding, like how many new people, what the satisfaction ratings were at the end, how they're doing.
Okay, so satisfaction, how many actually went through the onboarding programs, the completion rates. Anything else? Yep.
We look at sales productivity. So our onboarding program's been going for 18 months now. Actually, we can measure the productivity. How much revenue does a sales rep produce in their first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter, based on their role, and we compare it to historic data. So it's doesn't quantifiably say that our program's a success because the quality of people coming through the door might be better now than they were before, but it is one way we do monitor some, or we hopefully have provided an acceleration of their productivity compared to the people who haven't been.
Do you set a benchmark on that per quarter?
Different roles we do, but it varies for different countries as well, so there's quite a lot of parameters that we need to look at.
Yeah. And there's so many different ways, and I'm going to share with you how we do it at Rackspace. But I think the key here is just having some form of measure that everybody agrees and aligns with. And when I say everybody, I mean everyone, every stakeholder involved in the process of making new sales hires productive. One of the key stakeholders, your vice president of sales, and the sales leadership and director team need to agree that this is what success means. I believe that after 1 month, 8 weeks, whatever it may be, I'm going to measure the success of this new hire and the program based on this metric. And if you get that agreement and alignment, that's a really good step because it's really hard to do as well. So this is something that I've been working on. This is how I see measuring not just onboarding, but enablement generally at Rackspace. So I look at 3 specific metrics. The first one being an enablement metric. So I think somebody here mentioned that. around checking things like completion rates, satisfaction, how happy they were with the overall course. And then also, did the message and what we're trying to get across in the onboarding actually resonate? So I put in their value proposition. One of the key things that I implemented in our onboarding program when I first joined Rackspace is our narrative. What do we stand for? What makes us special and what makes us different? And do we have a consistent way of articulating that to our customers? So I call that the enablement metric, and how many salespeople can effectively articulate the value proposition and the learning and the sales plays that we're training them on through our onboarding. The way we measure this is super cool. Moved away from quizzes. I know that, some of you may still be a fan of that. Me personally, it just doesn't tell me much. It's more of a checkbox that we've done it. But what I find is actually effective is things like role play scenarios. So I've seen some of that in some of the presentations, but they work really well. So now we have a set process in Rackspace where after the salesperson has been through their initial onboarding where they should have mastered the value proposition, we have our sales managers go through specific scenarios where the salesperson has to act like they're in a real customer conversation and position Rackspace effectively based on the customer profile, their challenges, and so on. And they have a scoreboard that they complete to say, yes, they're saying all the right things, they're asking all the right questions, and they're leading the customer to the next stage, the pre-sales activity. So we have these scoreboards, our sales managers complete them, and they submit the forms. If the salesperson fails, they go through the process again. And they keep doing that until they've hit this metric of they've passed. So how many of our salespeople are actually passing the enablement metric on sales onboarding? Number one. Oh, question?
Do you manage the enablement metric piece since it's typically like new hire onboarding, or would you have the manager do that certification?
The manager would do that certification.
And then report back to you?
Absolutely. Guys, don't do that. There's got to be management accountability in this. We're not a huge team. In fact, I'm an individual contributor at Rackspace. I'm not going to have the time to assess every single sales new hire. So what I've done instead is coached our sales managers on how they should be going through that process. And now they do it really well with all of their new hires. And what they're seeing is through that process, they're able to really quickly identify gaps and see where their sellers are falling short, which allows us then to go back and say, right, we need to get you onto the sales qualifier session again, or actually we need you to nail the Rackspace value proposition. It's working really, really well. But it took a lot of effort to, number one, build those scenarios and train the managers and get them to actually do it, have the discipline to do it. Also, another way that we do that is through whiteboarding. Huge fan of whiteboarding. I wish there was something here. I would be drawing instead of sharing slides. But we also get them to deliver the value proposition through whiteboarding. Second metric that I look at is trending metrics. I call them trending metrics. That tells me whether the sales teams are heading in the right direction. So the way we did this with onboarding is we had discovery meetings. So how many new discovery meetings are sales teams going to? And that tells me that they're opening new conversations and they're being hunters rather than just waiting for leads. So that was a key metric. We recently changed it, up the ante to pipeline coverage because we found that was a common issue across our sales floor. So what we're now targeting our sellers and new hires on is how much pipe are you building in your first few months of being at Rackspace? And the final one is a revenue metric that my vice president is most interested in, is time to quota. How long does it take for a seller to get to their full ramp or their onboarding ramp quota, depending on which one you choose? We choose full ramp. So those are the three ways that we measure basically everything in sales enablement. There's always an enablement metric. Do they know what they're talking about? Can they have a conversation with the customer? Trending metrics, are we seeing the right opportunities come through and pipeline? And number three, revenue and bookings, are we seeing those come through?
Sorry, what's the time frame for that? Do you do 1 month, 90 days?
Okay, so the actual program, which I'm going to get into as well, is an 8-week program, but there's a ton of stuff that goes on around it that I want to go through as well. So I'm gonna come back to that. All right, so next one. What do we think this is? What do we think this is about? Yes, talent, feedback. Who would give that feedback?
Very high trade.
Think of Nico's Enrico's presentation earlier. What was that? I'm going to give you that. Absolutely. Sales managers and what I call peer shadowing. It's so funny how sales managers think that when you have a sales enablement person in place, they don't need to onboard. They need to do nothing. You are going to do everything, and by the end of your program, you're going to have a rock star salesperson. It doesn't work like that at all. When I first joined Rackspace, everything was coming to me. Yaron, my salesperson doesn't know this, or Yaron, they don't know the company's strategy, or Yaron, they haven't been allocated their accounts. Come on, guys. What's your job? So one of the things that I did with sitting with our sales managers is I said, what is your role in onboarding? What are you going to commit to? Because we're putting this much investment and time into onboarding. We need to have some skin in the game from you as well. So we actually went through this and we defined the role of the manager right from the start. So we have, as part of our program, we have something called Welcome Day. The managers go in, they greet their salesperson, they get them set up on all the systems. That's usually like, oh, somebody will do it, right? Nope. You need to make sure they're on those systems. They do things like the assessments. They connect them with their buddy. So I'll get onto that. They take them through the strategy. They set expectations. They take them through the MBOs. So while Sales Enablement built the MBOs, they take them through it so that there's some enforcement there. So our managers are actively involved throughout the entire sales onboarding program, not just the beginning welcome day, and then right at the end, are my sales hires successful? They are consistently inputting and adding in the whole program throughout the 8-week period. So number one, get your managers involved and make them accountable, right? They have a job to do, and we can get them sort of 40, 50% of the way there. I can tell you the rest of it, much to Enrico's presentation, it's the management layer, it's the coaching, it's the on-the-job training and experience that's really going to help and drive and accelerate productivity. The second thing we put in place is a buddy program. So now when our new sales hires come in, they're automatically assigned to a buddy based on their profile. So if they're working in the financial services industry, we're going to have somebody from FS. If it's insurance, we'll have somebody from insurance. If it's acquisition. And if it's install base, it will be somebody from install base. So we have rules of engagement for the buddy as well. So we've trained these buddies on what we expect from them when new hires are coming in, so they understand their part. We also had to give them something to say, we appreciate that you're doing that. So we do things like development credits. So as part of this, we give them development credits to say you're leading up to a management role based on, sort of supporting and coaching other new hires. Another thing that we're thinking about to motivate more salespeople, like our best salespeople, rock stars, to be part of this program is compensation relief. So even if it's like 3%, 5% compensation relief that gets them into President's Club, that works really well. So we've got to give something back, but this is invaluable, right? Going and shadowing meetings with your peers, getting their time, going through a deal with them, partnering with them. This is where all of the kind of the knowledge that you put into your program really comes into play. So if you haven't got that already, think about doing that. And the final piece is self-boarding. We're all grown-ups here. And like I say, if you hire the right people, they're going to be inquisitive enough, curious enough to go out there and find their own information. So for example, one of the things we do, we give our salespeople a list of people they need to be contacting, and it's up to them to engage with those SMEs and make the introductions. We don't do that for them, and the manager doesn't do that for them. We also have a digital onboarding pack, and it's up to them to go through that digital onboarding, not sort of wait for their manager to instruct them to do that. So we give them that day one to say, this is what you need to go through as a base level of understanding around the Rackspace value proposition. So manager coaching and peer shadowing, absolutely key. All right, I love this infographic. Any guesses on how this relates to onboarding? I bet you're all just looking at the pictures, right? They're really cool. My brother just had a baby, his first baby, and I sent this to him. I was like, you really need this. So I had to put this picture up.
He's onboarding your baby.
Yeah. Yeah, guidance is the right way to do things and there's a wrong way. So I told you it gets more cryptic. Sales process. So what is the process? What is the right way to do things, and what tools and content should you be using to do that. You don't want to dry a baby in the tumble dryer, right? So you have to have the right tools to actually go about doing that. And this is so important, because when your sales teams go back onto the sales floor and start driving those conversations, there's the right way to drive the sales process based on the experience that you have from your existing sellers, based on the success that you've seen. And it's really important to capture that at each stage. So I'm not going to go through the whole sales process, but some of the things that I pulled out that was really important for our sellers to know and to be aware of in terms of our expectations from them. Number one is preparing for success. One of the things I saw in successful salespeople at Rackspace is they really prepare. What I'm talking about here is things like account plans. So if it's our install base and they have a set of accounts, we used to have new hires come in and they'd get their accounts in month 2. Too late. They need to start thinking about their accounts straight away. So we built a process where when new hires are coming in, they get their accounts within a 1-week period. That's the SLA. And within that period, we're not asking them to actively go and engage with their accounts, but we're asking them to start researching and understanding those accounts, any white space, so that they can get ready. And the sooner we get them thinking about how they're going to actually execute sales and how they're going to drive pipeline and revenue, the better. Right? Don't wait till month 2. So preparing for success, if it's acquisition, territory plans. So we get them to build a territory plan and tell us how they're going to drive business within their specific territories as well. The marketing qualified lead versus sales prospecting. So we came in and sales said onboarding was great, but Yaron, I haven't got any leads. That's why I can't hit the second metric around pipeline coverage and discovery meetings. So I don't have leads coming from marketing. Excuse. How many of you have heard that from your salespeople? Yeah, I'm assuming a lot. It's an expectation that marketing will just give us leads. The general industry standard, from what I've seen, is around 40%, so 30%, 40% contribution from marketing. Where does the rest come in? It's usually partner and self-gen. So I had to get this in the mindset of our VP, who was like, no, we're gonna, that's a marketing role. So no, it's a joint collaborative effort, 40% marketing, the rest needs to come from our sellers, right? Why do we hire them? If they're not prospecting, what are they doing? So I did a lot of stuff around helping our sellers understand what we expect from them in terms of sales prospecting, and also implementing the right tools to support them to do that. So we implemented this awesome tool that has really helped our sellers drive one-to-one conversations and open new doors and drive pipeline themselves without waiting and relying on marketing. It was more important for us because in some of our newer markets like Germany and Northern Europe, we didn't have a marketing function. So they had nothing. So we needed to enable them with the right mindset to get back into prospecting and being a hunter. And then secondly, give them the right tools and content to help them do that. A few other things we went through the opportunity qualification process so they understand, how we expect them to qualify opportunities. I don't know what you guys use. When I came into Rackspace, we had BANT. Oh, sorry, it makes my stomach churn. It's old, get rid of it. I mean, it starts with how much money do you have? It just doesn't work. So we completely reinvented our opportunity qualification. We call it Nutcase. But essentially it starts with, what is the customer trying to drive? What are their objectives? What's their mission? What's holding them back, right? And really understanding the needs. So we went through the opportunity qualification process, creating win teams. So throughout the sales process, we all know there's no I in team, and definitely deals don't get won alone. So one of the key things we did as part of the sales process is helping our sellers to understand when to bring in the right people in your deals, whether that's pre-sales, solution architects, whether that's our product marketing expertise, whether that's executive leadership. Understanding when to bring the right people in to drive your sales process forward was really important. We call that navigating Rackspace, because it's hard to navigate Rackspace. It's a super complex organization and a super complex portfolio. So you really need to know who to bring in at the right time. And then finally, the internal admin processes and really understanding how to drive contracts forward, how to work with legal, finance, everything like that. So the salesperson understands from an end-to-end perspective what is expected of them as a salesperson, what processes they need to follow, and what tools and content they have to support them to do that. So if you don't have that already, it's a huge exercise, but it's super worthwhile, and it helps you get some efficiency and discipline around what your sellers are doing throughout the sales process. All right, so final one. Any guesses? Yep, one of my favorite films. We did that. They're in the right mindset now. We're right to the end. Mastery. I like that. We call this basically the dojo training, right? This is where typically when we think about sales onboarding, this is where it starts, is to build a training program to get your new sales hires productive. Huge part of it. But what I wanted to do is put up front all these 4 areas that I believe that we should be thinking about to make this work successfully. Because what I found previously is we've built an amazing program, they get into the sales floor and we're just not seeing the results. And what I found is that as sales enablement professionals, even if we don't control, we need to influence different parts of the organization to do all the other things that we've spoken about before the training program. Nevertheless, this is super important as well. So we have a pretty comprehensive blended learning program for our new hires. I'm not going to go through it in detail. After this session, I'm happy to talk to anyone about it. But there's 2 ways that we separate it. We call it low touch online learning. So everything that's low touch, things like product overviews. I don't want our sales teams in a classroom going through what products we sell. Things like, basic processes, things like HR, introductions to teams. Hey, I'm marketing. Really nice, but not high value. So we put all of that in our online learning. Stuff that they can just learn. We also put things like background information around the industry just to make sure we're covering any gaps they might have in terms of our the technology market that we operate in. So I call this low touch online learning. The reason why I call it low touch and we put all that stuff in there is because it's not going to help drive an effective customer conversation. Everything that drives a salesperson to have a great conversation with the customer and drive value in that conversation should be going into the high value on-site learning. So the core part of our on-site learning are our sales plays. So this is where we take all of our products and our portfolio and we position them around specific scenarios that we're seeing and sales plays that we're seeing within our market. That's valuable because it allows our sales teams to go out there and have a very relevant conversation to a specific set of scenarios that they know works and they know we have a compelling value proposition for. So that's what I mean by really thinking about, does this need to be classroom training because it's expensive, it's time consuming, there's a lot of investment, or can I put that in some remote learning where they're doing it through self-boarding? Really think about that because it's really easy to sometimes put high value stuff as online training and then low value stuff like this is our product in on-site learning, which just isn't valuable. What's valuable is our market, the challenges that we address, the value proposition that we have. And most importantly, I think, is practice. So through your on-site learning, if you're not putting a huge amount of practice around your proposition in there, I would definitely consider doing that. I say to my sellers, guys, this is a safe environment for you to practice your conversation and how you're adding value with your customers. When you get out there in the real world, you're not going to have this luxury, so use it. So we do a ton of activity around practicing through whiteboarding. My sellers are whiteboarding pros. Like they could come up here and whiteboard anything. And I love that because it drives conversation with the customer and they know how to bring the customer into the conversation as well, which I think is important. Bite-sized learning blocks, not a big believer in monolithic 2-3 month programs. Our US team love that. They have like a really lengthy program. I don't know how they afford it. But we do things in bite-sized learning blocks. 2 days. 2.5 days maximum on each topic, and it builds. So we give them some training and we give them some floor space or some on-the-job training. So they have time to go to client meetings, to shadow, to be in a deal and actually see that process. And they have that on-the-job experience as well. So really chunk it up. Don't think that you have to have a salesperson in and then every day they need to be in your onboarding program. They don't. They could be in there for 2 days and the rest of the 3 days they should be using to do digital learning, to shadow, to get management coaching, to practice. There's so much more that they could do, but you need to define that. And that's what I would do in the management and the peer section, which we saw earlier. and then multi-stage assessments. So over the sort of 8 to 10 week period, we have assessments that assess things like, have they got the Rackspace top level narrative? So our sales hires come in and they go through the narrative and we assess it. We have a scoreboard, everything is scored. The second assessment that they have is sales plays, and we give them different scenarios. They don't know which one it's going to be, and they have to articulate specifically the value proposition of Rackspace because our portfolio is like this big. So they need to know, based on that scenario, how do they share and how do they articulate the value of what we do. So multi-stage assessments, all of this is done by our sales managers, not by me. I started doing it and then I was like, Yaron, what are you doing? You need to make these people more accountable. They get paid a lot of money to do it as well. So went through a whole management coaching piece where we train them on every piece of content that we're going through, but also the assessment process, and they love it. I've got 2 coming up tomorrow and 1 on Friday, and some repeats, and they absolutely love it. They really enjoy the process of seeing the gaps and saying, actually, I can help this salesperson out. So blended learning program. So that's sort of the last piece that I had. So as a summary, typically, again, when we think about sales onboarding, our immediate reaction is, right, we need a training program. We're going to start with company strategy. We're going to talk about our markets. And that is all wonderful stuff. But I promise you, if you're not hiring right, if you don't understand how you're actually measuring, if you're not getting your managers and successful rock star salespeople involved, and if you're not thinking about the process and tools, all the effort and the investment that we put into the actual learning program is going to amount to nothing, if not much. And you're going to struggle to understand what went wrong. And typically, it's not your onboarding training program. It's all of this stuff. When they got back to the floor, did their manager give them enough coaching? And I've seen it firsthand that that's not happening with some of our managers at Rackspace. Do we have the right sales processes? Do sales teams understand their role in prospecting? Things like that is really going to help make sure that you get the most ROI from your training program. So with that, I want to thank you. I know that we're slightly over. Do we have time for any questions? Yep. Any questions, anyone? Hey.
How did you get your sales managers kind of on board with it? And are there any consequences if they don't do that coaching and actually be accountable for that?
Okay, so I'll answer the first part of that, how I got them on board. That was pretty easy. We had we didn't have an onboarding program. It wasn't great. And I'd done this before in a previous company as well. The way it really works is to prove the results. So we had some very skeptical managers, but when they went through the first assessment, the salesperson goes out the room and they're like, whoa, Yaron, that was amazing. I never thought a salesperson would be under this much pressure. And I said, yeah, and this is a safe environment. Now you've seen how they would have engaged with the customer. Would you have let them out? Probably not. So I think it's proving. So there's some convincing to do. It helps when there's like nothing there in the first place. There's no assessment process. And most importantly, I had my VP on side. So I had my vice president of sales who said, we are executing this. So it's coming from up top. And we knew we needed to get better at increasing new hire productivity because the metrics showed us that we were doing really badly on that. And then proving that it actually works and showing an example. Managers start talking and everybody's on board all of a sudden. That's what I would say to that. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Yep.
Have you gone as far as we're thinking about whether we actually tie this in with their probation period, so they don't pass out their probation period unless they achieve certain markers? Have you gone that far with this?
I suggested it. Our sales managers
How long did that go down?
hated it. They were like, do you know how hard it was for us to get this guy to accept our offer? Because we operate in a highly competitive market. This is going to scare them off. So we haven't got there yet. But I would say, why not? I always say to my sellers, this assessment process is not about us beating you with a stick. It's about us seeing where we've gone wrong or where we haven't done a good enough job. So it's to help you, it's to coach you. But if you really want to take it that far, then absolutely. So we have MBOs. We have first, second, and third month MBOs, and they do need to pass that. I mean, in order to pass their probation period. But at the moment, we haven't put the assessment as part of that MBO, so they don't need to pass the assessment to complete their probation period, just because everybody's super nervous, and we've only had this implemented for the past, I'd say, 3 months around the assessment process. But I think it's a good idea.
Did you say that you are currently giving ACV relief for people that you mentioned?
I'm suggesting it. So our if you think about our rockstar sellers, they just want to be making more money. How am I going to get them to agree to give me time to make my new hires productive? I got to give them something back.
I agree with you. I just wondered whether you'd actually.
Yeah, so I suggested it to our VP. It's being floated around. That's how we do things in Rackspace. You float the idea, and then you see, you know, how it resonates. But I really think I've done it in my previous company. 3% something, because sometimes you'll find they just miss President's Club because they've missed like 2-3%. How great is it to say, if you help this salesperson, and I mean really help, bring them into deals, take them through the whole process, we'll give you 3% in terms of quota relief. Floated the idea. I will let you know if it sticks. Yep.
We're just starting to try to implement a coaching program within sales, sort of peer-to-peer coaching. And we're trialing an app called Mental Click. I was just wondering, thinking about the buddy bit there and actually getting the logistics, because as you say, small team, lots of people, things like that I found are starting to land in terms of not being like, oh, weird, and actually being taken on board. I could see that being on the onboarding space as well. That's the bit we've always struggled. We're in Ericsson, huge. And we always struggled with the onboarding bit because we've got a ton of few people in HR. And lots and lots of people coming in, and they go, well, it's your job. So Mental Click, basically, it's like a dating app for coaches. So people sign up as a coach or a coachee. So that could be a buddy or a buddy.
Oh, that's awesome.
Put them together.
That sounds great. So at the moment, we do it like you suggested, so it's all very manual. So when they come in, the sales manager has to assign the buddy. There's no real kind of tracking around whether the buddy's actually doing their job, apart from the regular checks with their managers. But something like that to support that process, I think is great. So I'm going to look into Mental Click, because I think it's a massive part of successful sellers, successful new hires. Yeah, exactly. What tools do you have? So when you're looking at that whole process, what tools do you have to drive it? Mental Click. Check that out. Anything else? All right, guys, I'm going to be around for a few more minutes, so feel free to come to me with any other questions. But thank you so much for the engagement, and thank you for sticking. Thank you.